who are both doing English short summaries on the chat in Facebook Live, as well as Indonesian translation. It's not simultaneous translation, but it will give a sense of the conversation. Plus, also on Facebook Live, if friends have questions, please feel free to write them down in the notes, and we'll come to that later in the talk. And for friends who are joining us through, so in the Zoom meeting, if you have questions, you can either write them down in the chat. I'm pointing again at the chat because that's what my computer says it is. So I hope for you it's the same. Or just kind of keep them, and we also come to that later in the day, later in this talk. So for the program today, well, first is this short introduction by myself. Then we start with a presentation by Kathrin Böhm. After that, Badan Kajian Pertanahan will give a short presentation about their practice. We will have a short conversation together, and after that, we will ask you first, actually in the Zoom group, to share different questions that you may have. And then after that, we'll also open it up to friends that are joining us on Facebook Live. Aku juga mau bilang jika ada pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia juga gak apa-apa. So we can kind of translate any questions that come in, people who feel more comfortable asking in Indonesian is also okay. So to introduce our speakers today, let me start by introducing Kathrin Böhm. Kathrin is an artist based in London in the UK. She, in her practice, focuses on kind of the collective reproduction of public space, trade as a public realm, and the everyday as a starting point for culture. So she's the founding member of actually various groups and organizations and collectives, including the international artist group My Villages, the arts initiative Keep It Complex, Make It Clear, and the Art and Architecture Collective Public Works, and the Center for Plausible Economies, which also has a link with Company Drinks. So Company Drinks is a community drinks enterprise that Kathrin co-founded in 2014. It's kind of as a business as commons, and it's based in London in the neighborhoods of Barking and Dagenham. And Company Drinks links the history of hop picking in Kent to the formation of a new community enterprise, which brings people together to pick, process, and produce drinks in East London today. Maybe actually I'm thinking we start maybe with your presentation, if you don't mind, Kathrin, and then before we start with Ismal and Bunga, I will kind of share your bio then. Maybe it's easier to directly connect it, if that's okay. Yeah. So Kathrin, if you're ready, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sanne. Huh?
Sorry, I'm just saying if you want to start with the video.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the invitation. It's a huge honor being here today. And yeah, we start with a 7-minute video and then I start talking. Thank you very much.
Thank you too. Nisa, bisa mulai dengan video.
What is Company Drinks?
It's communal, educational, and social. Productive, collective, and at times commercial. Company Drinks is a community drinks enterprise based in the London borough of Barking and Dagenham. We're London, but with an Essex postcode. Going picking was the annual mass exodus of families from the East End to the nearby countryside in Kent to work as seasonal labour and to do fruit and hop picking.
When I came hop picking, I would meet all my cousins. It was a great reunion. Lots of fun, all the time, something going on.
It's a great day down in see a bow and half a dozen other butters, but hop picking is round again. And the family is sitting out on its pilgrimage to the green fields of Kent.
A lot of things have changed since the 1950s, when the hop picking days came to an end. London has grown enormously. There is no clear distinction between the city and the countryside anymore. And the populations have changed and moved as well.
My family originally came from Wapping in the East End. When I was about 3.5, my family moved out to Becontree. What would happen if people from East London went picking again?
We came here for our kids and they really enjoyed it.
Well, it was a good day out.
Yeah, we've been before.
To get away from London, get into nature, it's a nice experience.
We are involved in picking the strawberries, someone involved in making the drinks as well.
We are stage one.
Yeah, we're stage one.
We sap birch trees. We forage for elderflower, cherry blossom, and flowering currant, all in the local parks. We cut Japanese knotweed, and we harvest rosemary, mint, sage, and many other herbs. London is amazing in terms of picking. There's so much that grows in our public green spaces that we can use. In fact, there's enough elderflower growing in Barking to make enough syrup for the whole of London. We also do a few coast trips every summer. We go to farms in Kent to pick strawberries, cherries, red and black currant. And we also go hop picking once a year. The picking becomes part of the whole drinks production cycle. And the production cycle is open to everyone. You can get involved with the growing, you can come picking, or you can join in with the drinks making and the branding and the labeling. We trade together and we of course enjoy the drinks together. Any profits we make go back into the circle. The production cycle becomes like a new community space, a public space to meet and work and learn and share and socialize together. Everything we do kind of circulates around the big C.
C is in culture.
Hop picking and the East Enders going off to Kent.
C as in collective.
We spend time outside together. We share knowledge about how to grow things.
C as in community.
It's good fun. It's good social event.
It's a pleasure to come along Barking Park.
I feel like I'm part of a family.
I love to be here.
C as in collaborating. C as in commerce. Drinks sold locally go for £1. If we sell them in West London, they're £3. Cheers.
Cheers.
So I'm swapping over to a PowerPoint. 1 second. So I'm just talking now, no?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So maybe I explained, obviously the film already explains a lot, and you probably get a sense of that we do a lot of different things. The film was made for an exhibition about food last year for the Victoria and Albert Museum, and we were just trying to compress in 7 minutes a lot of the ideas and people and drinks and activities that are involved. But I'm going to talk through a PowerPoint to maybe describe also with more depth the ideas behind starting company drinks and how it's actually functioning, both as a public space, as a community space, and as an economy. The initial title was Company Movements, Deals and Drinks, just to keep it complicated, but it was always clear that it wasn't just about making drinks, it was about both social and geographical movements that have happened to London where we are based, It was about deals, it was about who's dealing with whom and who's benefiting from what. And it was, of course, about drinks as, drinks as one of the most common denominators we can find amongst ourselves. Everybody knows how to have a drink. The starting point, and I just explained this a bit more because it's probably not so known outside of the UK, is this history of people going hop picking. And hops are the plant in the background. It's part of the cannabis family. It's this very high growing vine that produces the flowers that are used mainly for the beer production. And those flowers needed hand picking until the harvest was mechanized. So people from East London would go to Kent, which is the nearby countryside, to hand pick those hops. They were, for the farmers, they were cheap labor that was needed to make profit from this incredibly profitable crop. Kent was the biggest producer of hops at the time in Britain. So they needed every year up to like 150,000 people who would come as seasonal workers to the countryside. So with the introduction of the railways in Britain in the mid-19th century, suddenly huge populations from London could go to Kent to spend 4 to 6 weeks there to pick hops and earn a bit of money. And that was mainly women and their children from what is the kind of traditional East End in London. That's my very sophisticated map, but maybe it gives a good overview of how things have changed, because company drinks is very much situated within the shift of histories and the shift of geographies and demographics in London. So that's London. There's the East End, the West End, and the city, what's normally known as the center of London. And that was the size of London at the time of hop picking. So families from the East End would go on a train to the hop gardens in Kent. And that was up to 100,000 people every year. And it was mainly women and children. And for women, it was, there's very beautiful oral history about this heritage. It was mainly about earning a bit of money, gaining a little bit of financial independence, getting the kids out of quite dusty and polluted living conditions in the East End. And very many women describe it as this kind of temporary utopia or temporary matriarchy. It was a culture over those 100 years of people going to Kent. It became a kind of rural culture owned by a working class population. And when you read the oral history or talk to women who still remember it, they would often say that it was about the money, but it was about being in good company. So there's a history that connects the financial with the social very closely, and is very, very well remembered by everybody who comes from a white working class family in East London. So the situation has changed since 1950s when the kind of manual hop harvest came to an end. London has grown massively into this thing that's called Greater London. There's actually no such thing as London. There's only an entity called Greater London. And our company is based in Barking and Dagenham, which is officially not London, but Essex. And this is like new kind of slightly a gardens city style suburb, which was built in the 1930s. So that's kind of the relationship where we're situated. So our drinks company is Barking and Dagenham. We refer to its history from the East End, which has a connection to the nearby countryside. So 6 years ago, I was interested in this history for many, many reasons. First of all, because it connects a very interesting like rural practice to an urban population. It's about collectivity and communality. It's about economy. It's about women. It's about temporary utopias and so on. So 6 years ago, there was an opportunity to get some art funding to start a new program. And instead of doing a reenactment of whatever those hop picking days were, which can also be seen quite nostalgic, we kind of started with a very straightforward invitation of going picking again. And this term going picking is understood by everybody who remembers hop picking as hop picking, but it's also easy understood by everybody who has a memory of having been to a garden and having picked some fruit. So it's also this very kind of universal activity. So that's how Company Drink started in 2014. And it was always clear that we wanted to have this cycle where the movements, the deals, the drinks, and this building a kind of new communal space would come together. As a model, and that's where the commons come in, I think there's two important ideas. One is that, first of all, the economy is something we regard as a public realm, as a public space, often referring to Catherine Gibson and her idea of the diverse economy as something we reclaim, taking back the economy from those who insist they're kind of specialists. So it's kind of a taking back the economy and putting a kind of new idea of economy in the center of what we do. And Company Drinks is literally organized as a production cycle where every element of the production cycle is made public. So instead of just going picking again, we also grow, we also process drinks, we bottle them, we distribute, we sell, reinvest, and we keep inviting people into the cycle. So this production cycle over the years has become a kind of new public communal space that practices commoning around drinks production. But I come back to this later. That's maybe too complicated now, but yes, we produce drinks. The drinks are the commodities that are most visible, but we're constantly trying to be transparent, clear about the fact that we act upon a very diverse economy. So on top of the drink cabinet, you see our drinks, but it's the economic underpinning is very kind of diverse or rich. So there's donations coming in, there's funding coming in, there's sales coming in, there's in-kind contributions coming in. But from the beginning, it was clear that our business model is one that's not straightforward, but it's trying to include a richness and a diversity, and maybe also wants to articulate a new richness that's not just financially driven. So yeah, we invited people to come picking again. It was a little bit nerve-wracking, like, hi, let's go picking. I mean, I don't know anyone in the group who ever started like a new project, and that's in Barking and Dagenham, which has very little institutionalized cultural infrastructure. So there's not a museum where you go to the outreach program and say, hello, we need whatever, 50 people who are interested in picking. You kind of start on the ground. And we started with the local history museum and people who were interested in heritage, and then just talked and talked and talked to a lot of people who know the area very well. I myself live in East London, but I don't live in Zone 5. I live in Zone 2. So I am from East London, but not from this particular neighborhood. So we started going picking again. Most of the time it's voluntary. People want to go picking for different reasons, not dissimilar to why women went picking in the past. These children are forced to go picking. This is not voluntary. That's part of the school curriculum. So we also work with a lot of schools which then pick up the offer of going picking as a way of talking about where does our food come from, doesn't come from a supermarket shelf. There's a farm in Dagenham, an organic farm. So we would make use of all those growing spaces, green spaces, public spaces, commons, to think about where and what can we actually pick. So it's a kind of like action through, it's a kind of research through action. Like we got to know Barking and Dagenham very well by just asking people what's growing where, who's growing what, and including this very broad range of growers and places where food can actually be produced and found. And that ranges from community organizations to commercial farmers. That's a commercial farm. We are going on bigger trips to the countryside where we hire those coaches that you've seen in the film. And this, for example, is a trip where we are gleaning. Don't know how common it is as a term. Gleaning is a word for picking when you pick after the commercial harvest has finished. So this is a big farm, huge monoculture, just outside of London. And they grow black currant for Ribena, which is quite a popular drink in England. And once they've gone through with the machines, we come and pick what's left. And again, those days are amazing. There's like 60 people coming because they want to pick. I'm always a bit nervous because, you know, you advertise that we're going to the countryside, and I'm always double checking with everyone. We're not going to go to a cute farm with cute little animals doing cute little things. We're actually going to a field and there's nothing, you know, there's like just rows and rows of blackcurrant. But those days are normally really, really beautiful because picking is such a self-explaining and social and very kind of satisfactory activity that we would spend a day there. There's normally the deal on those days is that obviously it's a free trip. Families can pick half of what they pick for the family, and half of what they pick goes back into our pot to make drinks. We do one trip with former hop pickers, people who as children have been hop picking and remember this, or come from families who have a hop picking heritage. And we found an extremely nice farmer who allows us to come onto the farm during the main harvest and pick hops. We make a cola, and that's a DIY cola together with an artist called Kate Rich, and she kind of reverse engineered the whole Pepsi recipe, and we make a cola from scratch, which is amazing and a separate story in itself. Then of course there's a whole process of bottling. Some of the drinks production is outsourced to small craft companies, some we do ourselves. But then what's important is that the whole process of going picking gets documented on the drinks that we produce. And we also produce cups. There's a lot of material around the drinks that allow us to talk about the bigger picture and idea of company drinks. And then every year we produce a drinks range, or we call it also like a family photo, because it's not just a product range. It's a family photo of what we, as a broader community or diverse communities that come together, have picked over the different seasons and the drinks we made from it. It's mainly non-alcoholic drinks. There's one beer, one cider, and the hops that goes into the beer also goes into a green hop tonic. And the range changes every year depending on ideas or what's growing or what's available, or people come with new recipes. So it's not a fixed range, it's a kind of responsive range that can produce and respond to ideas quite quickly. We are trading them, obviously, with drinks company. And I don't know if you got it in the film. The film was a bit disrupted, but we have a strict trading policy that half of our drinks stay in Barking and Dagenham. And that's to like not create a unique selling point in an area to then export everything. That's normally called a kind of colonial trading ethics. So half of our drinks stay in Barking and Dagenham, where we give them away for free or sell them at cost price, also reflecting the economic landscape there. And half of the drinks go to West London, where we sell them normally into the art world at maximum profit. So that's a bar we have been running every year at Freeze Art Fair, where we, as an arts project, but also drinks company, are one of the caterers in this very, very crazy art fair, having this very kind of ambiguous identity of being many, many different things at the same time, but also selling beer. So that's coming back to this cycle that I think explains quite well what we do. So it's like we're kind of organized around the seasons. We're currently in the summer, mainly production season. Autumn is normally our trading season, and winter is the season where we think about economy, how to reinvest, and how to sustain this cycle. the comments are very core to the whole idea. It's not a very useful word. It's not understood broadly. Comments is often misinterpreted, especially in England, as this kind of green land shared by farmers. So we don't use the word comments too often, and we leave the C in our logo, we leave it quite open to interpretation. And I think the main idea is that this cycle of production has many different entry points for many interests to enter for different reasons, and we allow the C to be interpreted on many different levels, you know, whether it's about good company or community, or whether it's about cola, and if people come for free beer, that's fine as well. But there's not so much enforcement from us to say this has to be this thing and it's a comments. But we talk more about community economies that's easier understood. A lot of people, of course, think of us as a social enterprise. So we use the language that we think is easy to understand, but we don't start with the comments because it is outside of a kind of certain academic discussion, not a very useful term yet. I hope it will become one very soon. That's our tablecloth, just to produce. I'm running out of time now. I have five more minutes. So the first 5 years we were nomadic. So Barking and Dagenham, just to give you an idea in terms of size, is maybe 8 kilometers long and 4 kilometers wide. It has roughly a population of, I think, 150,000. For the last 3 years, we started to have a permanent building. The first years we were just nomadic. Also trying to establish this idea of a communal public space that's not fixed to a location, but that generates through kind of networking, different groups across an area. And that's our building at the moment. It's a former sports club, and we have a small training kitchen there where we can produce the cordials, the non-carbonated drinks, but also where we can bring other groups in to use, and they use it for whatever they want to produce. And we have workshops and the cola workshops. So it's like a small multifunctional kitchen. And we have a club room that can sit up to 60, 70 people, which is used, I mean, not at the moment, it's quite abstract. I mean, obviously this is all shot since March, since Corona. So looking at the images is quite weird. I'm talking as if it would happen. And this, of course, is all empty at the moment because of Corona and the social distancing. But normally it's used as a kind of club room. There's homeschooling groups, there's volunteers groups, there's the growing club. We're having communal lunches once a month, which we call Digesting Politics, where we quite explicitly talk about politics in relation to food production. And again, kind of trying to work with a language that doesn't impose too many ideas. You know, words like organic are, again, not very useful to talk about access to food in Barking and Dagenham. So we are using this room to like come together, have discussions, be social, be discursive, do things together, and so on. And we also have a little grow club outside. That's our logo. And as I said before, this ambiguity is on purpose. And 2 years ago, we opened the Center for Plausible Economies. That sounds very grand, and it's meant to sound like that. And it's basically our kind of artist research strand of Company Drinks. Company Drinks started as an art commission. My one-liner is, it's art in the shape of a drinks company. If people don't get it, it's like art can be a painting, it can be a drinks company, what's the problem? But of course, because our program is so multifaceted, that sometimes the discussion around why is this art or artistic production gets lost. So 2 years ago, we started the Center for Plausible Economies to have a more specific discussion around economy as a cultural space, artistic practice as an economic practice. We're talking about the diverse economic underpinnings of artistic practice. We're talking about the iceberg, the things you see on top, the things that are below. We talk about dark matter. So that's kind of our public program to bring a discussion around artistic practice, cultural production, and economic thinking together. And that's it. Aha, coming back. Hello. So,
thank you so much, Kathrin. That was a really great overview.
It's so weird talking to a screen, sorry.
Yeah, I know.
But after 4 months, I'm not.
I know, I think we all have to get used to it a little bit. For me, it's also strange. I'm kind of sitting here a little bit by myself, but then everybody also joining us, no?
Yeah.
But that was really clear. Thank you so much for a really good kind of overview of your practice that includes both your work with the communities and, like you say, also these questions around economy that you're raising kind of as part of the project, as an inherent part of the project. Yeah, maybe we can come back to that also in the conversation, I would say. I think also for friends watching and who joined maybe a bit later, we're first going to have the presentations by, well, you've just seen Kathrin Böhm from Company Drinks, and next up are Mas Ismal, Muntaha, dan Bunga Siagian dari Badan Kajian Pertanahan. And then after that, we will have a short discussion, after which we will also take questions. So I would like to ask you, if you have specific questions, please kind of keep them, and we can have a conversation about those later. Kathrin, I see you just also shared the link to your website in the chat space. So anybody who's interested can also have a look at the Company Drinks website. It has also a really big archive of all their activities. I think quite a lot of activities are also online, aren't they? So it might, I don't know.
Well, yeah, on the 13th of March, we closed all public program. We, of course, look after the garden, and we are since then trying to find other ways of being together and staying together. A lot of it was online, but we are slowly moving back to meeting face to face. We are going picking again, but in much smaller groups. And so on.
Well, that's kind of nice. I can imagine. Okay, maybe first, Mas Ismal dan Mbak Bunga, I will kind of introduce you, if that's okay. And then you have about 20 minutes, a bit longer, a bit shorter, it's totally fine. So Badan Kajian Pertanahan are from Jatiwangi in Indonesia, in East Java. It can be translated to the Agency for the Study of Land. It's kind of mirroring the name of the governmental organization, governmental body called Badan Pertanahan Nasional, so the National Land Affair Agency, which is intentional, this kind of mimicry. And I think maybe you guys will say a bit more about that later, or otherwise we talk about it in the conversation. So Badan Kajian Pertanahan, BKP or BKP, is an artistic research lab in Jatiwangi, Indonesia, that adopts speculative practice and forms to address both the cultural landscape of the region as well as local issues concerning land. And then I would say particularly land like ownership and use, as well as the history. I think that's quite important in both the practices that we're going to be seeing today. And following on from this, so BKP intentionally mimic the governmental body National Land Affair Agency, and with the reason basically to not only mimic the visual rhetorics of that, but also the power that lies behind it. So the authority that comes with it. And for the past 3 years, maybe longer, yeah, guys, you've been working also in Kampung Wates, which is a village on the outskirts of Jatiwangi. So maybe Mas Ismal and Mbak Bunga.
Okay, thank
you. You can share your screen.
Yeah, before, thank you everyone also for joining. I saw also there is Mas Marco and then also some friends. So, okay, I will start to... Can you hear our voice very well or need too loud? Okay. Okay, so I will start share screen. Yeah, so here we live in Jatiwangi. it's actually in West Java, like around 4 hour or 3 hour from Jakarta. And this is the, when you see the lot of the building is the rooftop factory. So we are also part of the Jatiwangi Art Factory. So Jatiwangi Art Factory kind of working in this kind of big narration with about the the rooftop industry that slowly changing, decrease and changing into new industrial landscape with the new modern factory come to Jatiwangi. Like you see in here, like this is Majalengka, our city, and Jatiwangi now is in the middle of changing because a lot of infrastructure project from the national government come up with the international airport, and then highways, and then also like I mentioned before, like a lot of the factory move it from Jakarta and around city to Jatiwangi, and projecting Jatiwangi as the new industrial area in the northern of West Java. So, and Jatiwangi factory kind of working in this kind of narration. And yeah, so the BKP is kind of talking, or yeah, working side by side, but then we are talking in the more small narration, more specific, yeah.
In a small narration, if you're familiar with Jatiwangi factory, their main issue is it's about reptile and also the industrial landscape. That's the main issue that Jatiwangi factory working on. And as a research group, we try to engage with small or unpopular narration from Jatiwangi. With this BKP, like Ismal tried to, at first of BKP, he tried to start to research the local material of soil in Jatiwangi, but then we start to expand the work because the word Badan Kajian Pertanahan or tanah implies not only soil, but tanah is, it can be soil, it can be land, it can be
clay.
Clay. It's different with English word.
So tanah.
Soil is specific, clay is specific.
But in Indonesia,
land is specific, but tanah, it can be. It's really diverse meaning. So this is our. Besides research on material, we also working on how to, in specific context,
relation between,
more specific with the relation between land and community. So this is our village, Jatisura. Where's Jatiwangi factory?
Factory actually out of the map a little bit, but still in the same village. And with the pin is the Kampung Wates. Kampung Wates, our neighbor. So Jatisura is the name of the village, and in one village there is 5 block or 5 kampung, and Wates is one of the kampung. So we are in the same neighborhood, and that's what. So the Wates is kind of the village that also have still in conflict with the Indonesian Air Force, TNI AU, since 1950 until now. So the land is still in the
being occupied
or reclaimed by the Indonesian Air Force, which is like before that. It's happened during the Japanese colonial times, 1940, like because they afraid, because the Japanese make a airport maybe around like 500 meters from Kampung Wates. So because people afraid, so they choosing to move to Jatisura, to near Jav, and carry the house. And then after that, when
they come back.
Yeah, after war end, they come back again to their kampung. But then the Indonesian Air Force took the air base and then claimed it, the land surrounded as belong to them. So yeah, that's the situation. And then yeah, this is our logo, which is like Sanne mentioned, is kind of the mimicry the BPN, the Badan Pertanahan Nasional. We just put another wing, and then we put kajian in the as a word in there.
Kajian is research.
Is research, and then with our slogan, dari tanah kembali ke tanah, like from soil come back to soil again, and then or from land. Yeah, so mostly like BPN is talking about more administrative things like
yeah, it's funny because they also use tanah pertanahan, but most of their work inserted. Yeah, but most of their work, if you know, it's more about statistically. It's something.
Yeah, administrative
and something like that. While you know, pertanahan, the word tanah is the word that something, you know, it has so many layers inside, but they do something unrelated. So we try to make this land research agency as a mimic, and we put another wing is just to let's say to talking another layers that they didn't talk, and try to, let's say, to complete their wings,
and
something like that.
And we imagine that we also had kind of authority.
Yeah, the same power like that.
And it's reflected with our first project after that. So yeah, like I say that Watas village is, they didn't in the middle of conflict. They didn't have any certificate from BPN, from the National Land Department. But then we think so. That's
so as another institution, as twin institution. So we print another certificate,
with the same design with the official certificate, but then we just put the cultural rights. So like if in the BPN certificate is like ownership, physically, but then for us it's more important to highlighting
to recognize
the cultural.
In the cultural aspect, that they are the owner of the cultural aspect of the kampung.
And then through this project also we have a chance to there is someone from the presidential staff to sign the certificate, and then also they facilitate us also to make kind of negotiation or audience with the official national land department to BPN. And yeah, since that we also try to more enrich again the meaning of the cultural rights or the hak milik kebudayaan, and then one of the way is like through, we call it supernatural farming. So we imagine that our land is sacred because we taking care of that land. So we made kind of a farming. We planting black rice with the and offering with the new ritual that we propose. So this is the photo group of the farmer or the Watas community, and then behind that there is the rice field that we plant the black rice. And then also we playing with the symbol, because usually the BPN or someone who or the Indonesian Air Force always make a plank. What is plank like a billboard or something, like to declare that this is land belong to
signify
there. And we also made kind of the same thing, but then yeah, we say that in this land we planting the black rice as with the supernatural method and as a laboratorium farming and the manifest of the cultural rights of yeah. And then yeah, we creating the ritual, for example, like because in Watas usually every Friday nights they make a prayer together and in the mosque, and then after that and we try to okay, how about we the seed from the black rice is like praying first before it's planting. And then before planting also we are praying in the rice field. So yeah, we just connecting the how to say like the kebiasaan,
religious
yeah, the
aspect
religious
of
aspect,
of our lives through also with together with cultural things, because sometimes actually currently you see that the religious things oftenly separated with
yeah.
cultural things, and it's sometimes also opposite, as if it's opposite. It's religious activities is something holy, and cultural activities is something like more traditional, more more Japanese or something from the past, and we try to embrace both aspects together.
This is one of the rituals. So before it's planting, it's praying together, and with the salawat. Salawat is kind of the what to say in singing with the
praise the
praise the
Muhammad,
prophet, something kind of that.
Praise prophet.
Yeah, and hopefully we can like transfer the energy to the land and make it sacred. And also there's a picture also like we planting the banana tree, and then actually this is the ritual for the first day working, which is it needs to menggemburkan tuh kayak fertilizing. This is the ritual for fertilizing. So we kind of doing walking circle around, and then while we also kind of praying, and then pouring the holy water to the soil.
Yes, organic thing.
Yeah, and this is the rice, the black rice, and yeah, which is black rice because black rice kind of also very good for as a medicine and also for diet for more healthy. People mostly say more healthy than the normal rice, and yeah, and
it's a special rice.
Yeah, it's special rice, and we make kind of certificate also for this rice. So people who buy the rice can have a certificate, which is there is a ritual process there, road, and yeah, and this is another things that we do together is maybe you want to say.
Yeah, it's part of the history of kampung. Actually, yeah, the history history of Watas village is like it's traumatic. I mean, the history of the past put them in the position of a victim. It's make us angry if you remember that something related to violence. It's negative, and we try to because one of the consequence of the certificate is how to own the cultural. So we need to to create another tradition, another history. This event we call Gotong Rumah. Hari Gotong Rumah. Actually, it's happened, reenactment of one of the historical moment of Watas village.
When they reoccupy again the kampung after the war.
After the war, so it's like a symbolic gesture to reclaim again the land, but we do it in a fun ways. It's quite different with moment in the past, because we did it as part also to celebrate Independence Day of Indonesia. So it's lots of
like carnival.
Yeah, like carnival. So people how to remember their past to his history with a fun way.
Yeah, why it's carrying the house, because at that time 1940 they also carrying the house small similar like this, so kind of the make again the house and then carrying on the house, and people also kind of the bring the sheep, bring the everything like to remembering again that we move from next village, come back again to Wates village to stay there again or to occupy again the land. So this is part of the carnival, and then we add again another activity in this Hari Gotong Rumah, and every year is actually always changing. And then for this time we made kind of tumpeng tanah. We made a tumpeng from the soil from the Wates village, and then this moment quite emotional because people suddenly connecting to their motherland, like touching when the touching is kind of emotional in here. And and this is another
it's another this is the process of we also thinking to make these new histories, new ritual, new tradition to to be transfer into one, let's say, visible institution
to legitimate more.
To legitimate more. So we wrote our own history and we made our own museum. So this is we cooperate with the School of Design UP Universitas Pelita Harapan. They help us to design the museum.
Just the module.
Yeah, this is the museum. So we wrote our new histories in here.
Yeah.
Our new histories of claiming the land.
Yeah, like timeline.
Timeline.
And also the certificate. Also we put there the certificate, and also there is Wakare song. Wakare actually is the term for us in Wates. So the event when they move to carrying the house during the Japanese colonies. The Wakare is like a Japanese word. It means literally it means goodbye, but then at that time it means like we must go away, something like that. And then people recognize that as a Wakare event. This is the process for making the museum. So we using the ram earth technique. So we made also kind of how to build the museum is kind of we make kind of the festival, like, because I think we should celebrate this as the moment to
to
legitimate our history into a museum. And the student also very active involving from design until the production, like you see in the picture. And then also we invite also the vice mayor in the inauguration of the museum, and also there is Hilmar Farid from the Dirjen Kebudayaan, like cultural ministry, cultural ministry, came to see the museum. And I think that's all for now from us. I think we can talk in the discussion more. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ismal and Bunga. Oh wow, Kathrin, that's next level, that you can make an applause in the corner of your screen. I didn't even know that was possible.
We have it on reactions. I lived on Zoom the last 4 months.
Oh yeah, true. Oh, this is very dangerous that I know this. I'm going to overuse this totally.
Made one.
Ismal and Bunga, thank you so much for your presentation. It's really great to kind of also see the pictures of all the things that you're doing. And I think maybe also, Kathrin, if you would like to come back into the room in already unmute, yeah? Yeah. I have a feeling like, because the contexts are very different, but there's actually a lot of overlap, I think, between your practices. And I was thinking maybe the first thing that I would like to draw out is in a way that you both seem to work in different levels. So let's say one is that you're working directly with specific communities. In the case of BKP, you're working with your own community. In the case, oh sorry, that's my timer. Oh. In the case of Company Drinks, you're working with existing communities in Dagenham and Barking, but through your project kind of creating a different, like a new community that's also, like you say, more diverse. It can change through the different stages of the production process. And at the same time, you're also working, maybe this is something that I'd also like to ask Kathrin, as well as Ismal and Bunga, is that you're also working on the level with local, like on maybe a local politics level, let's say. So for instance, from BKP's presentation is already quite clear that very often you invite different local officials, or that you also mimic existing kind of governmental organizations, design, and kind of visual rhetoric to your advantage, let's say. And maybe in Company Drinks, I also saw on your website that this year you're going to collaborate with the park rangers in Dagenham, if I'm not mistaken, to make like a new kind of collective orchard in one of the parks. So like those two levels, so that's maybe one of the levels, let's say, that you're working, so with community and with local politics. And then the second thing is that you're working very actively and directly on different kind of projects practically with these different communities, but at the same time also working more on a conceptual level. So maybe relating to art practice or to the Center for Plausible Economies. I have a question about that separately later on. But I think like these different levels are it seems to be quite important in your practice. And I wonder why it is important for both of you. So it's a question to both of you, why it is important to work on all these levels, and maybe also question what kind of maybe the research element or the conceptual element brings to your practice with the communities itself.
Kathrin first.
So maybe if the
Kathrin,
if you would like to...
Can you hear the bell?
Oh yeah.
Yes, I do actually.
Yeah, sorry, just to explain, I'm actually not sitting in London, I'm sitting in my home village in southern Germany, and at 12 o'clock the bells ring, and it's the length of prayer talking about rituals.
I think you will hear the azan soon here too.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, we do work on a lot of different levels. I mean, we work with an extreme ambiguity. You know, we don't want to be nailed down as social enterprise or charity or arts project. So there's a lot of kind of ambiguity and levels and different languages, which sometimes can be a hindrance, because it's just for someone to want to understand quickly what you're doing, it's a bit too much sometimes. But of course, over a longer period of time, and I think that's where the long term comes in, those things become understandable. And it's not always like those levels are not something you can easily communicate. Like, I mean, of course, I can explain it in a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation, but I can't explain it in like a 2-minute quick conversation with someone I meet. But then I think the benefit then is to be existing over a longer period of time. So everybody who comes in contact with Company Drinks or takes part in Company Drinks starts to realize all those levels and the richness it brings for their own. We are not very much the pedagogical types. We really don't like to tell everybody how they should read us. We're putting much more effort into how to organize what we do in a way that it becomes readable, but we are not having to tell that it's about this and this and this and this. I mean, we're of course constantly connected on a municipal level. We're getting money from the municipality also for delivering their services, some of their social services. We are working with the park rangers, the libraries, with the cultural group. We now have a food steering group. And I think our problem is not that we are really liked as an organization in the neighborhood because, you know, it looks good. It tells a good story, but we're not necessarily taking serious as a kind of political agency, and that's what we have to change. And I think it has to do with, in general, the split between those are the specialists and the decision makers, and those are the communities that are provided for. And that's where the idea of the commons becomes really important, because that's where you kind of dissolve that discrepancy between decision making and community. So we are putting more effort in this year in explaining ourselves as a voice, also when it comes to planning, but that takes time. And it's just also like boring political games then you have to play, you know. Like.
And is there a particular, like, maybe this sounds strange, like goal that you have, or a specific desire in relation to these, like, kind of local politics that you would like your position to be more clear, like you would have to
reverse policies, you know, policies when it comes to making.
And what kind of policies, for instance?
Like, for example, the 3 food markets for London, that's big, yeah, it's big business. They're all moving to Barking because there's huge land. So this is like multi-billion investment. So of course they will come with that investment and say, oh, and we also have to do something for the community.
Yeah.
You know, we always think in terms of providing for this economically deprived community. It's never seen as an enabling or anything. So we are kind of trying to become a voice to say, well, you could organize a kind of local food economy with that money, rather than thinking of the poor population that needs provision. And that's a complete reversing of how kind of social provision is being thought of. You know, you could use that money to, like, hand over the budgets. You know, you could have participatory budgeting. You could have the steering group articulating the local food agenda. I think it's a matter of not importing, but making space for the resources you have locally to drive development.
Yeah, and then I can also understand, like, how your ambiguity in terms of language becomes important. That language that you're using is not co-opted by local government, and at the same time that you also need, like, to have a seat at that table, you need to be able to speak that language, let's say. Yeah. And then the commons becomes interesting, because the commons also as a notion has a way of more kind of thinking through alternative ways of organizing, I think, right? Like, on all levels.
I'm happy to share this experience. The commons are not a useful term in England for those discussions.
Yeah.
It's interpreted. Community economy is easier to understand.
Yeah, I understand. I think maybe this is also an interesting kind of to go into to ask Beka the same question, in the sense that, like, you're working on all these different levels, and also particularly with local politics. I think maybe for you, maybe the goal is quite similar. So to get a seat at the table, let's say, like, you've also organized like a symposium, for instance, where government officials from all these different backgrounds joined around the same table to talk about Terracotta City, for instance, or to kind of think through what languages, also as artists, I would say, you could mirror or mimic. Or I think somewhere I read that for you it's also important that BKP, as thinking through cultural ownership of the land, also is recognized in just basically just understanding that there's something there, like, and not like to create visibility for yourself within that realm of local politics. So maybe I'm quite curious how important it is for you to operate on all these levels.
Yeah, I think because in our context, it's like the local authority or the government is kind of our neighborhood also. Like, for example, in one village, we had a chief village, and we always meet almost every day, or the chief of district, even the police, the army also kind of it's our neighborhood. because every village there is a kind of one army or one village as Babin Kaptipa, something kind of that. So yeah, why we working in the multiple level, because that's our situation, and that's the
it's natural.
It's natural, and and why we always, like, for example, inviting the local authority in every, for example, ceremonial, because that's also the nature in the
it's nature living in the village. I mean, the first one, if you have a problem, the first one who will help you is your neighbor. And these people, even though they are government, in the village, in village life, we can present them as individual also. So we know person to person, and they are close with us. We have a close relationship. So we don't see them as someone, have a big power, and we don't have an access to them. Not like living in a city, even you don't know your head of village. No, the RT. Yeah, even we don't know who is our RT if we live in the city. But in village, I think to make a lot of friends is more important than to make our position is clear, because sometimes we never know in region PNS, how to say PNS,
civil officer.
Yeah, civil officer. They always, their role is always rolling. You know that. So this person is until 10 years again, 20 years again, still exists, but would have a different role. So why not to use their let's say power to empowering the government, to more active and engage with let's say civil activity. So it's not really separated. So yeah, it's normal also to use the help of army, let's say. I know that in the city, army, police have a really bad image. I know that as institution, yes, but as a person, we are neighbor. We know each other. We are really close. Yeah, that's the situation. I think it's a normal thing to work with your neighborhood. Neighbor is not only in the meaning of people who lives with you side by side, but also with inter-institution, something like that.
And yeah, for example, specific for water's contact is important, because it's kind of if we invite the authority, it's kind of a gesture to reclaim again the land. That's, for example, like because the land is reclaiming by Indonesian Air Force, but then the Angkatan Darat itu apa sih, the army, another division of the army always come to our activity. Our police is kind of also for us is good as
it's like showing the support for us.
Like,
so we use their image. It's only only 1 or 2 person coming, but with their uniform, it's so like kind of a gesture of support for us. It's important.
Yeah, like for example, when we have inauguration for the museum, like the Indonesian Air Force called me, like, and then what happened, and then they said, what do you do? And then we made a museum, and then I said the vice mayor came also, and then they inaugurated the museum. Oh, okay, thank you. And so it's for it's end the conversation.
Because it becomes recognizable, or it becomes something that's more clear, or has more authority.
Yeah, like as a vice mayor also comes. So okay, so yeah.
So it's not an illegal thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in the past, like
it's very different if we compare with 90s. People fight literally fight, demonstration in the street, masih di sawah tuh.
In the rice field.
In the rice field, and even 2 people died. So it's like face-to-face battling with the Air Force, but now the approach is really different with the past.
And also, like when people build a house, the army or the Indonesian Air Force always come and then and say that not you must make a permission first to Indonesian Air Force. But then even we make a museum, but yeah, it's
they
okay.
don't ask that.
Yeah, they don't ask that because we say that the vice mayor also come to inaugurate the museum.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're kind of like, when Kathrin is talking about ambiguity, I think maybe that also holds true for you, like that this kind of in-between space that you can operate also through art practice is quite an interesting space. Like I read an interview somewhere, Mas Ismal, in which you said that you, maybe I quote you, yeah? I don't know if that's weird. So where you said, like, we cannot divide the world in two, in right and wrong. We should not limit our options to resist or accept or reject or avoid, but what we should do is mix and blend. In a sense of like how, and it's also something, Kathrin, that I kind of also gather from company drinks practice, that how to think about how to diversify. So instead of being antagonistic, because in the end you are thinking through and kind of and activating, I think, alternative ways of, maybe like you say, collectivity, of being together, community economies that are that clearly have a political agency also locally, and that are maybe post-capitalist, you could say, or in the case of BKP could be kind of against the imperialist forces at play in Jatiwangi, both from the Air Force that holds still the ownership to the land, but also to kind of the influx of big capitalist organizations trying to set up big factories everywhere that kind of take away more domestic or local industries. So there's something interesting there in the kind of the reviving also of these histories, in not necessarily direct opposition to something, but by providing an alternative. And I think maybe this idea of community economies, Kathrin, that you also mentioned, maybe it's a good kind of segue into a question around that, because I think this is also something that, again, although the contexts are very different, BKP is also doing in different ways. Like you set up, apa namanya, yang investasi. What is the name?
Investasi.
Yeah.
Investment.
Yeah, so this kind of alternative investment scheme, so people don't just invest in land, because the land prices in Jatiwangi are going up and up and up, and often the land is only seen as property, as something that can be all owned and sold and bought, but to kind of try to insert other values into that notion of investment in itself. So your investment also, for instance, includes your idea of investment, which is also the language you're mirroring, I would say, from these other kinds of the actual investment that is happening and the land grabbing that is happening. It also has a community operated restaurant, for instance. So these ideas of community economies are all is very much part of your project. Yeah, and maybe my question would be is, what are the kinds of values that you are producing, in a sense, or that you are trying to focus on or work through by building these different kinds of community economies? So it's again a question for both of you, maybe.
Sure.
Yeah, please.
I think with this ambiguity, I'm thinking maybe it's the kind of the wrong word, because I think also within the political situation we are in, it's also extremely important to be very clear about our values. You know, there's no ambiguity about the values we want. But I think with the ambiguity, it's more about not signing up to the binary. You know, kind of insisting on this acknowledgement of a non-binary that goes through all of our lives, every day, all day long. You know, there's not compartmentalizing between this is business, this is life, this is work, this is home. Kind of purposeful kind of confusion of those things to explain it. Things are, of course, we know through the whole idea of intersectionality, but also things are interdependent. And that's a very key idea within the whole community economies model. And maybe I should explain quickly where the community economies model comes from. It's from Gibson Graham, this like writers duo in Australia, where Catherine Gibson is still active, and it's this basic idea that economy is something we as communities organize. So the business community is organizing economy for themselves very, very well. But it's Catherine Gibson wrote this very important book, Take Back the Economy, which says the economy is something we all do and shapes for everything we do all the time. There's, of course, incredibly unequal relationships within the overall system, but economy is something we are all part of and can shape. So it's a kind of acknowledgement of the fact that we are all part of making economies and making this kind of public discussion and a public way of organizing, of looking at, okay, what is the economy of, let's for example say company drinks community. There's different communities. It's not meant as geographical communities. It can be intentional communities. You can be in different communities at the same time. It's this very kind of broad idea of community, but it says that any group organizes their economies around their resources and their aims. And what community economies does, I mean, there's a website I'll put it in the chat in a minute, but this idea of interdependence is extremely important, and to be aware of this and be very careful in how we organize economic relationships where we can. Yeah. So with company drinks, we are trying very hard not to have exploitative economic relationships or we don't have a capitalist driven relationship thinking either. We're not trying to have like colonial relationships, how we work. So this idea of interdependence is super, super important to also then declare this value of equality, loyalty, responsibility for each other and the planet. So that's the core values it comes down to at the end. But to understand economy as this extreme system of interdependence, there's not one thing not depending on something else or affecting something else.
Yeah, I think for us, I know it can be recognized as a failure, but for us it's kind of the value of surviving. I think like bertahan aja gitu, maksudnya in the middle of the wave of the investment, land rushing, and also in the middle of conflict in the army and Indonesian Air Force. I think we just like kind of survive.
Yeah, as a common people, how to survive this, in this many layers of situation that we are trapped in the middle. The history of as a post-colonial, and also the capitalistic and everything's pandemic and everything's. So yeah, it's just the way us to survive actually.
And
that's the main value, I think.
Yeah, for example, when we see the wave of investment, like they build, the Nike factory is now in the only 10 minutes from our village. Like can be accommodate have a worker until 5,000 people. Like, but people is kind of see that as a opportunity, not see as something that capitalists come. So they kind of celebrating, but like people see it as a new opportunity to as a new economy for them. I mean, to improving their economy, for example. So we cannot see that in that way. Like, this is capitalism. It will make us fight with our neighborhood. I mean, like, so what we do is only kind of surviving and then playing with in this kind of situation.
Mm-mm. Yeah, maybe that's also like maybe my last question before we can open it up to the rest, to the first Zoom meeting and then to friends watching via Facebook Live. My question is maybe to do like with these broader power structures, if you think about coloniality, if you think about capitalism, about huge foreign investments coming in, which sounds like not only foreign investments, but also local investments, what Kathrin was saying about the food markets, what's happening with all the different garments and textile factories that are coming in to Jatiwangi, often from Taiwan. I'm wondering, like, in this, particularly in this period with the Corona pandemic, has anything like changed in your practice? Has it become more? Has certain things become more clear? Have certain things become less important, or has it totally stayed the same, or has it shown inequalities, like, or that actually maybe in terms of, if you say like one of the main things that you're focusing on is survival, maybe those actually the skills that we need in a pandemic we already have. Like, yeah, this again is a question for both of you, like in relation to the current pandemic, how has that affected your practice or not?
I'll go second now, if that's okay.
One first?
Yeah, can you go first?
Kalian boleh mulai.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, this pandemic.
Convey.
Yeah. We believe that working for the common is needs, like endurance. We need to working. We believe that this kind of work needs a long duration, because we want to build something that we can perceive. Yeah. So we build something, another way of, let's say, another way of future, or kind of that, and it cannot change only in 1 year, 2 years. It took a long time, I think. So this pandemic is
Convey us.
Yeah, kayak gitu.
For me it's like I saw like actually the situation in here during this pandemic is not kind of in the middle of state of emergency. I mean, everything is almost like a normal, but then this pandemic remind me especially to, I think it's important also to think a more long duration activity, for example, about the ketahanan pangan. Like, imagine like if we can have a rice, or the basic food is getting increased, how we survive, something kind of that. And but then for me, I saw also this kind of perspective, like to working more focused or more in the more small scale. For example, in one kampung, it's also related. If we connect it to water, also is because in the context of reclaiming the land, I think it's important. The one of the important thing is not only about the history of the land, but also about the future. How we can still cultivate the land, and it's one of the it's written in the agrarian laws in Indonesia, that someone who have rights to own land is someone who taking care of that land for almost at least for 20 years, but then also for the future. For example, like in the context with the conflict with the Indonesian Air Force, the land that they claim is they didn't take care of that. Like even they only they have air base, but then they only fishing. Even there is no plane arrive there. Like so, yeah, they kind of abandoned that land. So it's kind of make us more have another reason to the pandemic have another reason to working again, like for example continuing planting and in the term of the food sovereignty, something kind of that. But yeah, I think that's for me. I think that's good.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like over this pandemic, but I think, I mean, there was a moment where, in the beginning, where I think because company drinks is not constructed around the idea of a monoculture, you know, it's clearly constructed around this idea of diverse economic underpinning. And that gave or gives us, I mean, we are tiny, tiny organizations, just to say it, but it gave us a certain resilience that allowed us to actually adapt relatively quickly without panicking. So that there was a kind of proof or something of that a certain kind of economic diversity brings a resilience. So you're not completely exposed to everything that comes, like to any external kind of pressure. So that was a good experience. I think what I really can't see yet, obviously with the pandemic, the whole idea of interdependence has become problematic. You know, suddenly it's also the idea of obviously the spread of a virus on a global scale, and everything gets extremely individualized again. The notion of public being in public, being together with many, suddenly becomes a threat rather than a nice promise. And I think that's where I probably see the biggest threat in a way, because of course that's what the neoliberal model wants. It wants us to be individualized completely within our private spheres, to completely destroy the public and the communal sphere as a place for alternative. So that's kind of where I maybe see the biggest challenge in the kind of near future of like, how can we obtain and maintain those cultures of being together, being in common, collectivizing, being in solidarity. But let's see, without having the space, the actual physical space to practice it, where do we practice elsewhere? And I mean, yeah, I think in Britain in particular, the Black Lives Matter movement, of course, has made everyone refocus on what are the priority equalities, and it's obviously racial equality in the part of the world where I am, and then all the other equalities follows. You know, food equality, cultural equality, mobility equality. So that put another kind of sharpened the focus during the pandemic as well here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you both for sharing during this past already hour and a half. I'm just checking in on the time. I think we started a little bit later, so I think if you're okay, maybe we can continue to like 5 or 10 past or 6 o'clock here in Jogja. It will be 5 to 10 past past 1, I think, in Central European time. But maybe I would like to go actually now to take some questions first from the friends who joined us on Zoom here. I already see like Nia. Maybe Nia can come if you are still here. Could you come on the speaker if you don't mind? Or otherwise I can also just read your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi. So you had basically 3 questions, 2 to Kathrin and 1 to Ismal and Bunga. The question to Kathrin was taking back power from people who insist they are specialists. So I think maybe Kathrin already answered that question by talking a bit more about the community economies. If not, please feel free to ask again. And the second question is, you mentioned art in the form of a drinks company. Do you have any advice for us who might be seeking funding for similar projects, or even to communicate it to other people? How can we explain this concept in a clear and convincing way? But maybe Nia, you could explain a little bit, like in a few sentences or lines about how, like what exactly your project is doing.
No, I just wanted to ask in general about this concept of business or yeah, basically business as art. And if you say it in that way, it's so broad and it's so general that it can sound like a gimmick to people who are not kind of like familiar with these kinds of concepts. So I was just wondering if there was a way to kind of approach it when, yeah, because usually sometimes fundings or things like that are either from it's either or, like it's either from kind of from like the business world or it's from the art world. It's rare to find kind of like those intersections, at least for me.
Yeah, I can confirm that. I think once you go to funders, which is a particular practice, you kind of need to speak their language, otherwise they don't understand you. There's colleagues of us in Northern Italy who are also part of the community economy network. They're called Brave New Alps, and they've set up exactly the same model of community drinks. It's called in Italian Comunità Frizzante, and they got their initial funding through local development funds, local business development funds, which was a very kind of straightforward fund for social enterprise. And then they applied for it and argued for it with a community economy idea. So they're using a very kind of conventional funding stream for social enterprise to not only communicate what community economies is, but also apply and then practice it. So they use it in a very, very, very super interesting way, but through business funding.
Okay.
But I mean, in terms of funders, we get funding from English Heritage, we get funding from the Arts Council, we get funding for educational work, we get funding for all sorts of things. But yeah, you will have to speak a little bit the language of the fund. Make things easier.
Makes sense.
But you could get, yeah, I mean, we can easily argue lots of different reasons why somebody should fund us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kathrin.
Thank you, Kathrin.
Nia, you also had a question for Mas Ismal and Mbak Bunga, right?
Yes.
So the question is, how would you define research? A few people use that word to describe their projects these days, but they're not bringing as much depth and knowledge as you. So the question, Mas Ismal and Mbak Bunga, is how do you define research?
Oh, it's a very difficult question. Research. Yeah, I don't know how often people use it. Research. Yeah, in the artwork, yes, the word is quite familiar and popular. But for us, research is, we use it as, as tools to investigate, but the most important thing is how do you use what you found. I mean, it's not about the research itself, but it's also about how you deliver the result. And in our practice, we use a performance. We are performing the research, performing the archive. It's like the approach is using artistic research, so you can see the research actually through the activities.
Yeah, I think similar, right? We not hopefully we not trapped in kind of the research in the kaku, like but more like we just kind of the performing that the term for the gaining more or gaining deeper or seeking more, especially the archive in, for example, in the context of Oorthuizen, it is important to examine again the riwayat tanah, the history of the owning the land. But then we come up with the hari gotong rumah is kind of the also sometimes we call it like performing like our research with the hari gotong rumah, something kind of that. Yeah, but then also interesting, like now, like the Jatiswara government village see the or mention the hari gotong rumah as a tradition, as a local tradition, and put it officially as a local tradition of Jatiswara village, I think. Though it's already happened only just 3 years, right? But it's like putting in with the same another tradition that happened more older.
Thank you, Mas Ismal dan Mbak Bunga.
Terima kasih. So I'm just seeing one more question from Maya, who actually also asked, which is a good question, if we should all come on the camera and show our smiles. So anybody who feels comfortable to come on camera, it's also fine if you don't, or if your connection is not strong enough, also fine. But for those who want, please, hi, that's nice. So Maya, you just wrote in the chat, how did you decide to apply the model of volunteering work into an art project? It's obviously a trend, at least before Corona. And how do you deal with the fiscal conflict one creates through free labor? This is a question for Kathrin. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Shall I just answer, like try and respond? Okay. I think what I maybe should have described better this production cycle that we have, and this idea that there's a lot of different possibility for engaging with it or becoming part of it or stepping in. First of all, of course, that's voluntary. Company drinks is not compulsory, other than for those poor school children. But there's of course many different roles possible. There's the role, and I think that's maybe not this. There's this kind of, what is it? There's 7 levels of participatory art, or is it 8 levels? Everything from passing by to actually decision making. And I think those different levels are possible within company drinks. Someone can just come once, never again. Some people decide to come very often, but want to stay volunteers. Other people come and become paid member of the team. So there's different roles possible, and the volunteering one is a very, very particular one. Everybody in company drinks who actually delivers activities is paid. The volunteering work is quite separate from the paid work, and some people don't want to be called volunteers, they want to be called members. So it's a little bit you can almost like choose your own role a bit, and they're all possible. And the picking trips together, I think I was trying to explain that there's a deal that we pay for the day. We can't, the deal is we pay for the day, families get a free trip, and we share the fruit that we pick. In other situations, the deal looks very different. Like someone runs the Grow Club and they get, of course, paid, but the people who come to the Grow Club who want to come as volunteers are volunteers. So there's a huge differentiation in terms of roles and paid labor, unpaid labor.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
So ask a question because I'm not defining on like this is a problem in according to like historical exploit of labor as well, but rather that it is a future trend that people start to volunteer because we more and more have free time. Also in the debate of basic incomes, like in general, that there's less and less jobs and people are less and more unemployed, and like it's also kind of a work therapy, right?
Yeah.
Have you been also like talking on this as well, like that you see there's this potential of many people having a lot of time to work as well?
I mean, I think within the comments discussion, that's a very kind of prominent discussion, you know, the distinction between paid labor, unpaid labor, how do we provide for each other and so on. But I think, yeah, the opportunity to actually spend time on something that you yourself experience as meaningful and of value is something we need to raise again once the actual labor market will shrink, and it will shrink. Whether it's kind of called slow labor or labor just gets this different meaning. But I think this clear distinction between labor only being classified as labor when it's paid to unpaid labor, that's part of this take back the economy argument, that it's of course all forms of labor and they should be valued equally, but they're not always financially reimbursed. But I think it's a discussion that's very closely linked to the idea of the commons, which will also not be possible to step out of any kind of monetarized capitalist system in the near future anyway. There will be mixed forms of both types of labor, and it's just how can we maybe slowly reorganize the relationships in value of those different forms of labor.
Also, maybe as a comparison, like the question to Ismail, how you deal with volunteering work. Are you working with these models as well?
Sorry, Annette. Yeah, actually, yeah, it's important for us to decentering our position in working with community. Yeah, actually, they perceive us not as, you know, as a collective or a group or institution. They perceive us as a friends, actually.
Neighbor,
and we also have a land in there, so we have same position. So if we talk about the fight, the land ownership, so actually we talk about ourselves also, and about who work, and it's related also to who's take the benefit in this kind of activity, right? Yeah, we Ajan, can you still hear us?
our bell.
Continue, or
Do you think it's disturbed? I mean, the sound is okay?
Yeah, it's clear. It's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. Actually, we you know, in some of project, they start to they really recognize the activities as their own. Yeah. It's like the farming. They always put the hashtag supranatural farming on their activity in Facebook. If they post, if it just, you know, planting something in the garden, they put supernatural farming, and they recognize the gotong rumah as their new tradition. So it's more like, you know, in Indonesia we have a gotong royong spirit. It's like working together ethos for some, based on some value and for some reason, but it cannot be repeated. I mean, it really depends on event. So what we actually do is, you know, creating an event that people have a free will, have urgency also to do that. If people don't have that kind of urgency, the project will be failed, because it's free. It's it's voluntary. Everything is voluntary. So if we don't find the same urgency, the same question, the same value, it will be failed. Absolutely failed. So yeah, that's why everything is organically actually.
Yeah.
We never plan anything. We don't have a program. We don't have a strict plan. What we're doing is just nongkrong together, like hang out together, talking everything, and they
suddenly come up some idea.
Yeah, suddenly come up like spontan idea. Oh, let's do it. Okay.
Let's carry the house.
Yeah, let's carry the house. Okay, I will take a role as a director, because people do a theatrical performance in there. So
there is our neighborhood who are passionate as a director of theatricals, and so they like we never start with the we have a project and then you involve with never that start with that kind of model. Like Bunga say, like it's kind starting like come up organically or spontaneously, like while we have conversation together, hang out, and like for example the Hari Gotong Rumah is come up with, oh now like 2 months, next 2 months we will have some village anniversary, what will we do? And then how about let's carrying the house, and then and then let's make using costume, same costume with the like imagine the past, and then maybe I can bring the rice, something kind of that, and then so it's more like happen in that way. I mean, not in kind of the we explain this is the art project, and then you involve, and then you will get this something happen in that way for our context.
Yeah, Maya, if you want to ask one short question, because we have one more question in the group and about 10 minutes left of the conversation.
Okay,
so
just a small comment. It reminds me a lot on like the time I spent in Belgrade in Serbia and Bosnia as well, and Croatia, and like former Yugoslavia also had the socialist movement where they grouped up people to work together for a high purpose. Like, so it was this Radni Akcija, Umjetnosti Radni Akcija, where the youth people, they would go work in camps for 2 months, and they actually really succeeded to build up cities and train roads and highways. And I just perceived it now in the 0 years there, and I still realized like this term of Radni Akcija, which means working action, is still very present, like especially in the village side. And people, if there is an issue, like a bigger construction which has to be done, or like there's something in the common ground which is not functioning, so people, they group up and they just use this term to work together, and they come together in like big groups of 50 people, and this is really nice. This is something I feel like there's maybe also this tradition of like, or the relationship to Indonesia with the non-aligned movement back in the old times, right? In the Cold War times, right? So yeah, I hope we could imply this in Europe as well. Or England also had a big labor movement, right? So I also feel like company drinks, they are very much based on this history and tradition of like harvesting the herbs and the fruits, right? So it's identity, right?
Yeah, that's in the initial title. When we had movements in our title, we looked at different movements we would like to associate ourselves with. There's lots of movements, back to the land, the diggers movement, the commons, the foraging. There's many movements, which I think it's just a shame that they get written as history as something that didn't succeed. The tragedy of the commons as what everybody remembers, rather than insisting that it was all quite functioning economic models. They just got overrun by capitalism as wanting to be so dominant. That's, yeah. I'm just watching time, sorry. I'm finished.
Maybe just also talking about like history in Switzerland, or like especially in cities. They also had in the 20s, like when there was this big economical crisis, they had huge construction projects where they used voluntary work to construct main stations and all these things. And so I guess this is like this guilt we have because we work with free labor, or like this feeling of like, hey, labor has to be paid, especially prices are rising so much. But I think the benefit of like the communal work you receive is much bigger than.
Sorry, I would like to go to a question from Adam. Maybe Adam, would you like to share your question?
Well, I suppose I was just interested in the relationship between the values that you communicate, and I suppose this was specifically to company drinks, but actually it could be to other projects as well. But what are the sort of practical things that you need to put in place? The values that you're communicating are all about the collective and all about the community. But what are the mechanisms that you have to put in place in order to make that a reality and to make people feel like that's more than just language? To make people feel like they have a sense of ownership over the, to coin a phrase, ownership of the means of production and distribution and exchange, arguably. I'm just interested in what that looks like in practice. And apologies if that's opening up a huge can of worms that would take 3 hours to answer in full, but maybe you can summarize.
Quickly, I mean, we are a completely horizontal small team, and I think at the moment it would be more correct to say that we are maybe community led. So we are just very responsive all the time, you know, like we just enable things or like continue things that are popular. But we are at the moment in a process of like reorganizing the way we run ourselves. There's also, of course, I think we are mainly white team. You know, there's a need to look at any kind of possible organizational racism within how we actually run ourselves. So we are completely in the middle of reorganizing, or like reflecting and reorganizing. But a few things that were already clear, which will become more practical, is that a lot of the budgets will just become much more participatory. So at the moment we manage most of the money coming out, but this can of course be distributed. So in practical terms, we are a team of 5. We have 6 groups that are relatively regular, and to like organize it as a kind of spider web organizational diagram where then budgets and responsibilities get equally distributed, rather than organized from us as the core team. But we are reorganizing at the moment, and I think if we come back to a public program in early 21, hopefully this will be reflected. But we are not a cooperative. We are not a based model either yet.
Would you see that as an aspiration to ultimately evolve into a cooperative?
Because cooperatives are just so much cooler than like limited by guarantee with a non-for-profit. But I think it's also good not to be too romantic about certain ideas. You know, it has to be practical at the end of the day. Practices of solidarity, commoning, and community economies can also be practiced in any setting. You can reorganize almost any setting to do this. So yeah. But yeah, I think we're definitely moving from community focused and community led to community in charge.
I think that answers your question, Adam.
But we can also.
Yeah. I suppose I'm wondering from Ismal and Bunga's point of view, is there to what extent do you have to also think about those sorts of processes in Indonesia, given the kind of gotong royong value system that is probably much more widely understood in Indonesia than it is in the UK? Also, are you having to think about the sort of distribution of power and the means of decision making in the project and in terms of the ownership of the organization?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I can answer like talking about the ownership or something. I think it's, I don't know, yeah, because we are in the nature of working together as people who living in the village, and yeah, they recognize us also not as let's say like group or art collective. Is something is weird, like if we talk with that, I'm from the BKP as in research lab, it will be
complicated.
Yeah, complicated and weird. So it's happened is more like yeah, for example, because in here is quite common to have some activity together. For example, in Wates they have tahlil every month together, and people like really, let's say, volunteering, like people bring the food and then make a tent together. So in that sense is we also doing in that way. I mean, but some of the decision making is more like communication. For example, when we build a museum, is we are the who communicate with the architect teams, and then we ask them also to come to Wates to explain
to do their own research.
Yeah, and then presentation what we will build together, and but then also the decision of when we can make a museum is also from the community, because we use a land, community land, but then also in that case, like even the people in Wates, like udunan, like to buy the land for.
Yeah, how to say udunan?
Udunan is like
yeah,
you
give money.
You donate the money to buy the land for build the museum, because it's the land owning by our neighborhood. But then we decide to, how about we buy the land, and it's the idea is come up also from
the community
itself. Yeah, and then we have the land, and then we can build the museum. And also now we also thinking together to expand the land also, so we have more bigger land, then we can build another like park or something that food cart or something. I think that's, and hopefully I answer the question that you mean.
Okay, thanks so much, guys. I just wanted to check in because it's now nearly 6:05. I just wanted to double check if there's any questions from friends following the conversation on Facebook Live. If so, please write it now. And otherwise, are there any kind of questions or thoughts within the Zoom room, the Zoom room, that anybody would like to share? Or maybe there's actually questions from Kathrin or from Ismal and Bunga.
Yeah, okay.
There's lots of questions. I'm sure we'll somehow meet again.
Yeah, it's probably true. Maya, did you have another question?
Yes, maybe like to go into Adam's question about like what are the properties to give back to the people, right? So like talking about communal work is also like mostly creating like micro social clusters of people and networks as well. And like the question is like how those networks can become greater communities, right? So communities we don't only have in projects which are linked to agriculture, but there's so many diverse communities like all over the world, and especially they're so bound to like this urban scale, like they're happening in the cities as well. And I think each network or community has like a common idea, so like this ideology which is based on knowledge, isn't it? So like for common drinks is like introducing the people into knowledge of how to produce drinks or how to harvest and seed and plant and trees and agriculture. And I think this is something which is really interesting, because most of the time those voluntary work projects, they are targeted from bigger companies as well, because they create information as well. Like you could use it in forms of data banks. And so this is like this one topic where the Silicon Valley is crazy about, like they want to dig into it as well. But at the same time, like the people, like the communities or the networks, they produce knowledge which is creating resilience within the community or the people, right? So I really think like like Kathrin also said, like you rethinking about like how to change this now with the post-corona times, and it's very complex, and like also the Black Lives Matters movement, everything. So I think solidarity for me is like something which is very important. Like you also see like the solidarity with your neighborhood, and you also have to be in communication with the municipality and the neighborhood and the surroundings as well. And yeah, I just think like also being in this process of building up networks and communities here as well. Like we're here to build like a fab lab, a maker space, and a hacker space, and you can see like we have like lots of space as well. But I think there's a lot of struggle on like how to do this, you know. Like having, as Kathrin said, there are so many ways how you have to create monetary, like how to survive actually, you know. You have to be by the help of voluntary works and work with the municipalities and stuff like this. So I would really like to, if people like share more of this knowledge of like how to create those things as well, like manuals or like whatever.
Maybe it's good to say that also on the website actually of Company Drinks and also of Badan Kajian Pertanahan, there's quite a lot of resources actually available in terms of like past events, but also different kind of interviews and writing about their work that also kind of gives a sense of these more practical realities and how these things are being, like how this kind of way of working or maybe idea of community economies is being implemented within different local contexts.
There's always a scale of networks, you know, like of course Company Drinks is networked locally and regionally. There's the network of the Community Economy Institute. They're launching a new idea which is called the interdependence for organizations worldwide who work around the principles of community economies to identify as one network. We are closely linked to the Land Workers Alliance in the UK, which is a land-based network, and they are of course closely linked to Via Campesina, which is a global network. So I think there's always like a, you know, you're interconnected to many different levels, but to bring it all more together as one voice and one ambition, I think that's what a lot of us are struggling with at the moment.
Could you share those links also in the chat?
Huh?
Could you share those links as well?
I hope I didn't misspell them.
Nisa unmuted me because I started talking without a voice. Thank you, Nisa. So I was just saying it's 6:10 now. I feel a bit like a clock, but I think it's important because people who joined don't all have time after, like we said, the event would end. So I think maybe unless there's anything like really urgent, I would actually maybe like to close off and say, first of all, a huge thank you to Kathrin, to Ismal and Bunga for joining us today. Oh, hold on, I can do the reactions.
Me too. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you also everyone for joining the Zoom and for watching us on Facebook Live. Just to say, we've also recorded this conversation. It will be available after this event, also on Facebook as well as on our YouTube channel. And yeah, just maybe to say, for me personally, it was a really interesting conversation because it's two practices that I thought I knew quite well already, and I think I got to know even better through this conversation, which I really appreciate. And I think it's interesting to see just so much to learn actually in terms of how to think through alternative ways of thinking about economy, of thinking about different histories, of thinking about the places that we live and that we work, and how it comes as a practical way to kind of imagine different futures that, like Kathrin said, are more equal, are more based on community, are more based on solidarity, like Maya brought in, more based on gotong royong maybe. So I think there's actually a lot to learn from, and we actually probably could have this conversation for a lot longer still. So like Kathrin said, I'm sure we will meet again. For now, I would like to also let you know, so like I said in the beginning, this event is the second event of our online program for Struggles for Sovereignty, Land, Water, Farming, Food. The second event was today. The third event will be next week, the third and the fourth event actually. So the third event will be on Thursday. I wrote this down somewhere, but I took so many notes, I don't know where I left it right now. The third event is next week. Here it is, on the 23rd. So it's on Thursday, the 23rd of July, the same time as today's event. So from 4 until 6 Indonesian time. So it's General Greenwich Mean Time +7, which will be a conversation with Cipta Gelar, which is an indigenous village in West Java. And with AMAN, which is Aliansi Masyarakat Adat Nusantara, which stands for Indigenous Peoples Alliance of the Archipelago. That conversation will be in Indonesian, but like today, there will be kind of summaries available, translated into English. And then on the Friday, so that's the day after that, on the Friday the 24th, again from 4 until 6, we will have our first reading group, which will be connected to Thursday's event, and which is called Bagaimana Mengukur, that's a tongue twister, Mengukur Tanah, or How to Value Land. And we will watch a film by Ria Rizaldi about a tin mine in Bangka Island, and read a text by scholar and writer Emil Heinz, which is called Decolonizing Practice as the Horizon for Political Action. It's quite a mouthful, but it's a really interesting text. So anybody who's able to join, please do so. Follow us on Instagram and on Facebook so you can keep updated with the program. Well, that's kind of the promotion for now. Yeah, again, thanks so much, everyone. It's been really a pleasure. And